Hello, I'm Kim Jun-in-Seol. U.S. President Joe Biden is visiting South Korea for his first summit with President Yoon Suk-yeol to strengthen the two countries' regional cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. For this edition of The Point, we take a look at how the leaders elevate their comprehensive strategic alliance to a new level to tackle global economic, environmental, and security challenges. Three main agendas expected to top the summit table involve the allies' coordinated response against North Korea's provocations, ways to up contribution to global challenges, and issues surrounding economic security. During his official visit to Asia, U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to formally unveil the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, a scheme to strengthen U.S. trade alliance and widen its economic footprint at a multilateral level. The framework is seen as vital for the U.S., which seeks to actively engage in trade deals, but had to overcome increased domestic criticism for being outmaneuvered by China's aggressive economic and trading arrangements. A newly formed economic bloc participating in the IPEF is expected to help the Biden administration rewrite regulations related to tariffs, intellectual property rights, subsidies, as well as investments that are currently unfavorable to the U.S. According to U.S.-based think tank the Atlantic Council, IPEF's four pillars include fair and resilient trade of digital, labor, and environmental standards, supply chain resilience, particularly in regards to semiconductors and batteries, infrastructure decarbonization and clean energy, last but not least, tax and anti-corruption. Even before the official launch of the IPEF, President Yoon Suk-yeol says South Korea will actively seek to join the framework, which would cement an alliance that will facilitate bilateral cooperation on a stable supply of core parts, including semiconductors and batteries.
이번 주에 방한하는 미국 바이든 대통령과 인도 태평양 경제 프레임워크를 통한 글로벌 공급망 협력 강화 방안을 논의할 것입니다. 공급망 안정화 방안뿐 아니라 디지털 경제와 탄소 중립 등 다양한 경제 안보에 관련된 사안이 포함될 것입니다.
The two leaders are slated to engage in a joint press conference after their summit on Saturday and hold a dinner at the National Museum of Korea. For an in-depth analysis, I invite three experts. First, I invite Dr. Kim Heungchong, president of the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy. He's on my right. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. Thank you.
I also invite Mr. Thomas Byrne, president and CEO of the Korea Society, and Mr. Tokola, vice president of the Korea Economic Institute of America. Welcome to the show, Mr. Byrne and Mr. Tokola.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Tokola, I want to start with you. How significant is the upcoming summit for the two countries' leaders, particularly in regards to executing the U.S.'s Indo-Pacific strategy?
Well, this is a significant summit. I mean, every summit's significant because there are so few of them. It's more than just the two presidents getting to know each other. Preparing for a summit requires a lot of work-level contact at all levels, and that leads to close cooperation between the two governments. This trip probably would have happened sooner, but events got in the way. And that worked out very well from a U.S.-Korea point of view, because it gives Presidents Biden and Yoon an early chance to meet each other. The trip has two big themes, I would say. One is the importance of South Korea and Japan to the United States. It's significant that President Biden chose Seoul and Tokyo for his first visit. It shows the importance of the two countries for the administration's Indo-Pacific strategy. And second is I would look at the emphasis on multilateral cooperation. This is a real hallmark of the Biden administration. So this trip will involve a meeting of the Quad. It will involve the rollout of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. And I would remind people it also comes just on the heels of the U.S.-ASEAN summit in Washington, D.C. So it highlights the Biden administration's strong focus on regional groupings of countries to solve common challenges.
Right. I want to focus on the IPEF. Mr. Byrne, President Biden is to formally launch the IPEF during his Asia trip. What do you expect to be unveiled in the IPEF that differentiates it apart from existing U.S. trade and economic frameworks?
Well, I guess it's a step forward because the U.S. has been absent in economic and trade arrangements. The latest ones in Asia, the TPP, also the new name is a comprehensive and progressive TPP, but also the regional RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. The U.S. is absent. The big thing about just to start off with the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, it's not a treaty. So the U.S. is really not offering many incentives for other countries to join, other than it's probably very good for everyone to cooperate. There'll be no greater market access. Moreover, since it's not a treaty, it won't be going to Congress, so no laws will be affected in the U.S. This will be an executive action. And as we all know from past presidencies, executive actions could prove to be temporary and not enduring. So that's the biggest difference.
Well, you mentioned RCEP, and it refers to the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership comprised of 16 countries, including South Korea, China, Japan, and the 10-member ASEAN member countries that went into effect earlier this year. President Yoon have called for the speedy implementation of IPEF despite, these lack of benefits. But U.S. senators from both parties have criticized it as lacking substance, and Washington is highly unlikely to garner, in my point of view, congressional support for agreements that appear undermining U.S. labor and companies. So with that in mind, Dr. Kim, what's the realistic merit the alliance will have with South Korea joining the IPEF at this moment?
Well, I think that the initiative is also very beneficial, could be very beneficial to Korea. Because this is, although as Mr. Burns already mentioned that this initiative is not the trade pact or trade treaties, but it will talk about the standard actually, so which is very important for the future technology. And also we'll talk about the digital economy, and we'll talk about the transparency issue. We'll talk about the other trade facilitation issues. All of these issues are very important for the future, the boosting the economic cooperation for the future technology, and also the future trade environment as well. So I think that this initiative is also beneficial to the Korea to accommodate our economies to the new environment of the future trade environment, I think.
Right. South Korea is a trade-based, highly dependent on exports and trade, and
Yes.
facilitating this could open up new opportunities for exporters and tech developers.
Yes.
Well, the U.S. contends the IPEF is inclusive, but local media outlets here in South Korea say that the IPEF in nature is exclusive because it does not include China at this moment, the world's second largest economy. Mr. Byrne, what's your opinion regarding this criticism?
Well, I think the idea in the Biden administration is to counter China by forming this framework. So I don't know if that's a valid criticism, but note that India is part of the Indo-Pacific Economic Partnership, but it's not part of RCEP. So in that sense, it is inclusive. However, there are other criticisms. Not all the ASEAN countries, I believe, are at least on the short list to join IPEF right away, whereas all the ASEAN countries are in RCEP.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you another part about it. There were criticisms that the IPEF was designed to counter rising China, and that includes, reflecting today's markets about intellectual property rights. What kind of problem does it want to address with IPEF?
Well, Mark mentioned the four pillars. I think the thing is, how will these four pillars be substantiated? I think it's great that the U.S. cooperates more with its partners in Asia. Perhaps there is promise that we can make more progress on digital trade. That a lot of work remains to be done. So, we'll just have to see how all these ideas are fleshed out.
You mentioned the ASEAN countries. Well, the U.S. hope to use IPEF to rein in regional allies like South Korea and Japan and ASEAN countries on board. Dr. Kim, do you think this could materialize given that China and ASEAN are one of the largest trading partners with each other. And, there's a pessimistic view considering South Korea's trade with the United States, which is only half of that of China, with RCEP now in effect this year. So what are your views about these pessimistic criticisms surrounding it?
I don't think it's a proper evaluation that this initiative is designed actually against China. Because this is kind of the new initiative for the new standard, and any countries can join these initiatives if their economies actually fit to this kind of our aim for the future technology and the future economy. So although now the China is not the first wave for these participants, but I hope that in the future that the IPEF is materialized, and then I hope that then China can have ready for the joining this initiative in the future. Yeah.
So details of the IPEF has yet to emerge since it's not launched formally yet, but taking a look at its frameworks and its principles, you think that China, if it wants to join, it could join. It should not be considered as exclusive.
Yes, I don't think that we need to exclude any kind of possibility of the China. And then also, if you think of the ASEAN countries as well, then where the ASEAN countries and China they're very, very close. Relations, economic relations, and also this is an Indo-Pacific initiative. So we don't have to have a kind of the prejudgment that any specific countries should be excluded.
Right. President Yoon also said that we're going to facilitate a separate FTA with China, so you don't have to really worry about these Cold War mentalities. Participants of the new platform IPEF will likely include Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore for now, but there are at least 8 countries that want to newly be included in the IPEF. U.S. relationship with South Korea and Japan need to be deepened if they're to serve as a counterweight to China's ambitions, though, because the core Indo-Pacific strategy is to rebalance to Asia, and the way to do it for the U.S. is to strengthen its alliance with these allies. But for South Korean companies, though, let's be realistic. They're wary because the last time the country was hit by China's retaliatory measures for deploying THAAD, the costs were really heavy. Mr. Tokola, in the diplomatic side, what's U.S.'s strategy to make it easier for allies to tilt away from China diplomatically or ideologically, since the U.S. can't afford to bear the cost for allies' economic repercussions when standing up to China?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd put it in terms of trying to lure countries away from China. It's more the case that China is pushing countries in the region away from China toward the United States and towards each other, too. Korean and other foreign companies are divesting from China now to make sure they're not overly dependent on China. And those are rational commercial decisions based on their experience in operating in China. I would mention, too, that Chinese companies are under the same pressure to fall in line with Chinese foreign policy priorities rather than making purely commercially based decisions. But as Dr. Kim said, no one's talking about decoupling from the Chinese economy. Korea is economically dependent on China for trade and investment, as is the United States, and as is almost every other country. There's enough economic turmoil in the world trading system because of the COVID pandemic, because of the Ukraine war, that we need to make sure that China remains part of the world trading system. We also need to make sure at the same time, however, that democracies can minimize their vulnerability to Chinese pressure. So one useful topic for regional cooperation or dialogue would be how we can cooperatively stand up to Chinese economic coercion when it takes place, such as happened during the THAAD retaliation. It's likely to happen again. Next time it could be a European country.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the two leaders first, met at a local chip plant in Pyeongtaek earlier today of the world's biggest chip maker, Samsung Electronics. The Korean company is expected to start building its second foundry plant in Taylor, worth $16 billion US. It seems that the two allies are being upfront about its tech collaboration. So, Mr. Byrne, what needs to be hashed out to effectively facilitate semiconductor supply between the two allies?
Well, something that has languished over almost the past year now is a reconciliation of a bill passed by the Senate, and the House has a version, and they have to reconcile it. It's the CHIPS Act. It's to provide incentives, $52 billion worth, for onshoring or reshoring of semiconductor production in the U.S. I know South Korean companies are very interested in this, as well as the large Taiwan semiconductor company. So if the U.S. could get its act together and pass this literally, I think this will provide big incentives for Korean companies to invest even more in the U.S. And we know that Samsung and SK have already signaled very large investments in the U.S., in Texas, and as well as in Georgia.
Right. There are plenty of foundry plants. Samsung Electronics already have one in Taylor. Well, Mr. Kim, what needs to be hashed out, though, effectively for semiconductor supply to facilitate between the two allies? Because the last time I had Trade Minister sitting in that chair last year, he says they need to hash out some details regarding company secrets that had to be handed out to the U.S. authorities for safety reasons. So what needs to be hashed out between the two allies?
Well, company secret cannot be revealed, yeah, and it depends on the interest of the company. But one of the advantages that the Korean companies to invest in the United States is the stability and the implementation of some kind of act and government policy. That is very important. And so I think that as far as I know, that now the United States pushes the act for the chips and the fast chips, and so actually I am more interested in the kind of national treatment of the Korean companies investing in the United States, and also the favorable conditions. But the two acts, the act for the chips and the fabs, should be applied equally to the other foreign and American companies, now in the United States. So we will follow and then chasing the what kind of the conditions actually the Korean companies in the United States can enjoy actually in the United States. I think
right. Currently in the United States, according to its Act of 1962, foreign companies that are producing chips or high-tech industries involved in those high-tech industries have to apply those high standards of compliance to U.S. authorities for now, but
yes,
that may change probably during the summit.
Yes, I hope so.
We hope so.
Yes.
Well, Samsung has yet to join the RE100 initiative, which sets a 2050 target for 100% renewable electricity. Dr. Tim, do you think the summit could mark a turning point for companies to join the RE100, which is significant in achieving the carbon neutrality goals set by South Korea?
Yes, RE100 is the initiatives by the private companies. And then the Korean companies has actually, made an effort to joining this kind of the international initiatives. And so it might be, you might think that this state visit, the official visit of the President Biden, could be a catalyst for more the Korean companies to pronounce that. But I think that the Korean companies has its original plan and are very interested in the RE100, even before President Biden's visit. And then I think that this kind of a strong trend will continue for the Korean companies actually to accommodate themselves to the new environment for the more stronger criteria for the international standard for the carbon neutrality. So it will continue, yeah.
It will continue. Well, staying with the energy transition, the two allies are expected to officially collaborate on the development of small modular reactors, or SMRs. They're touted as an alternative to building big conventional nuclear power plants, which are slower and expensive to build. Mr. Byrne, how significant is this collaboration, taking into account that the two countries' carbon neutrality goals are set very high right now?
I think it's a very good move. Also, keep in mind that the European Commission has labeled nuclear power as well as natural gas as environmentally sustainable activities. So these are now tolerated, and investments are tolerated in these industries in the European Union. And I think it's good that the U.S. and Korea recognize that nuclear will play a role in achieving the goal of carbon neutrality.
Well, what particular, what are the key takeaways that you're expecting to be coming out from the summit to facilitate those collaboration?
Well, there was talk a couple of years ago of some sort of collaboration in the nuclear power industry between South Korea and the United States. South Korea is very good at making nuclear power plants, and the U.S. has technology as well. So again, some sort of concrete scheme for cooperation would be very good.
Right, and regarding probably how to better manage the nuclear power plant waste, which lacks
that's a big issue, right?
Right.
That's a very big issue. There's no global repository yet for radioactive waste. That would probably that could be a huge step forward if progress could be made on that. That's also a little hitch in the European Commission's new taxonomy, that it hopes that radioactive waste will be properly disposed.
Well, their summit, I want to shift gears a little bit. Their summit comes amid signs of an imminent nuclear testing by North Korea. Mr. Tokola, what do you expect as a key takeaways regarding their coordinated response towards the denuclearization issue and U.S.'s extended nuclear deterrence during his visit here in South Korea?
That's actually shifting gears a lot, but I'm happy to answer the question. I don't think that either the Biden administration or the Yoon administration are eager to talk about North Korea. There are too many other things on the table. There's too many other pressing agenda items. Until North Korea decides it wants to re-engage in diplomacy, there's not much that can be done. But the summit leaders can't completely ignore it. I expect the two leaders will say that they will cooperate closely on diplomacy toward North Korea. I expect they will say they're prepared to engage with North Korea diplomatically when North Korea is prepared to return to the table. They may repeat their offer of humanitarian assistance, which North Korea badly needs. And I expect they will emphasize they will respond to North Korean provocations, such as a possible long-range missile or nuclear test. On the nuclear arms issue, Russia has unhelpfully put the issue of use of nuclear weapons back into public discourse. That means the U.S. extended nuclear deterrence has also become a topic again. I think we'll come back to the same conclusions we reached before when this has been an issue. First, the U.S. extended nuclear deterrent is credible. Second, the U.S. and South Korean conventional forces are more than capable of dealing with North Korea's threats. And third, proliferation of nuclear weapons in the region would not be stabilizing. So it's difficult to imagine North Korea will denuclearize anytime soon, but that does not mean it should be a forgotten goal. We should hold that as an eventual prospect. And if nuclear weapons proliferate in the region, it's going to make that denuclearization of North Korea in the long run much more difficult.
We are running out of time, but offering humanitarian aid to the North, which is struggling to contain the virus, which it officially acknowledged for the first time, is also expected to come up during the summit, along with the denuclearization issue. So, Dr. Kim, what's your prospect regarding sending North Korea aid, given the struggles the two Koreas have experienced before in providing medical assistance to the North?
Actually, we are keen to provide any kind of the humanitarian assistance to North Korea, especially for the COVID-19 effect. So we are really willing to assist North Korea soothe now the very rapid spread of the pandemic in North Korea, and we are very interested in how the North Korea react to our proposal. So we are waiting for the North Korea's response actually to our proposal, and because this pandemic, it's not so. It's very. We need to hurry up to tackle this kind of pandemic in North Korea, and there was an estimation that in North Korea, if there is no further assistance, then maybe at least 220,000 people casualties that will happen actually, even the Omicron disease. So now it's a very imminent situation. I think that so we need to help North Korea. Yeah.
Right, South Korea will be ready with the assistance of the United States for humanitarian causes, but North Korea has to respond to get these humanitarian and medical aid to receive assistance. All right, that's all the time we have for now. We looked into the three major agendas to be on the table between the leaders of South Korea and the United States. Dr. Kim, Mr. Byrne, and Mr. Tokola, thanks for sharing your insights with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's it for me. You can check out all of our stories on our Arirang website or YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.